Hello my YouTube friends. Today I'm going to show you 5 quick tricks that will make your OBS streams look a lot better. So let's get to it. My analytics say that 80% of the folks watching my content are not subscribed. Am I doing something wrong? If so, let me know in the comments. But if you are looking for tools, tips, and tricks that can help make you a better YouTuber or live streamer, subscribe to the channel and click that bell so you don't miss any new content. It's totally free. This first one is super simple but effective. What I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna rename this scene. You just right click on it and click rename. I'm gonna call it SC, which stands for nested scene, and dash main cam. And then I'm gonna go into sources and I'm gonna add a video input capture. And we're gonna just call this one camera. I'm gonna drop it down, select my cam link, and I'm gonna change it to custom and change the resolution. And I'm gonna go ahead and select a custom audio device, and I'm gonna select my cam link as well. Now, normally I would have renamed this to NS instead of SC. I messed that up, but NS is just what I use to designate a nested scene. And if you've never used a nested scene before, well, you're gonna understand why I use nested scenes later, because I'm gonna show you exactly what the benefits are. But for now, we're just going to create this little scene here. Once I'm done, I'm going to shrink up my box. And what I'm gonna do is click the plus and I'm gonna add a color source. And I'll just rename this border, and then I'm gonna click OK, and we're gonna select a color. I'm gonna use this bright yellow color and click OK and OK. And then I'm gonna move it down below my camera so we can see it in the background. And I'm gonna resize this up so it just adds a little bit of a border around our camera. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is really basic and stupid, and I don't know why you'd wanna do this, but you're going to have to see how this looks when it's combined with all the other tricks you see here, because this is ridiculous and simple, but you're not going to believe how much of a difference this can make. Now I hold down the Alt key and crop it in a little bit here on the right hand side, and there we go. So that we have our initial camera. So I'm going to create another scene. We're just going to call this one scene and click OK. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the plus and I'm going to go ahead and add that scene. I'm just going to select it and click OK, and there we go. So now we have our camera in here, and we're going to shrink it down a little bit, and it already looks interesting. It already adds something, that little border. So all I'm going to do here is click the plus again, and I'm going to add a tutorial background, something like I'd normally use. I'm going to do a display capture, and I'm going to select the proper display. In this case, we're going to have Premiere in the background, and click OK. And now I'm going to just drag that down there, and there we go. Now you can see that using a nested scene means that that yellow border that we added is automatically going to be on the camera when I add it in here. And that's why you use a nested scene. Any change you make in that nested scene will automatically be in any scene that you use that camera on. And you can already see this just adds a little bit something extra to this scene, and it's just that simple. Now any camera can look way better with some proper lighting. So let me show you how to light your area properly. Okay, lighting. It's really important. You want to have, if you can, 3-point lighting. So over here I have a light. It's behind this diffuser to make it softer on my face, of course. And then the camera's right there, and then I have a light over here. Now you'll see that light is not actually pointing directly at me. It is using the wall as a bounce to also make it softer for me and my face and stuff. I use bounce lights, and you will probably find it's easier to get soft light if you use bounce light as well. Usually this light will be the brightest light, and you can move it anywhere from behind the camera to the angle that I have. And then this is going to be a softer light, which just adds a little bit of the fill on my face. So one side is a little brighter than the other side, but everything is lit well. Now you'll also notice my third light is up here. Now that is called, a hair light or a headlight, and some people will put those behind you or something like that. I like to have it above. It kind of just, basically that's the light that pulls you off that background. And this is the setup that most people would advise, especially if you're working in a studio kind of situation. And what the reflection off of the wall and through the reflective surfaces and that sort of stuff does is it keeps your face from being all washed out and really white or bright. And that's kind of a nice thing to have. It's just a little trick that you learn when you start doing it. So definitely make sure that you work out your lighting. Now we can tweak the way our camera looks with some simple color grading. Now we're gonna add a little bit of color flare to this. So I'm gonna select the camera in my nested scene. I'm gonna right click and go to filters. Then I'm gonna select color correction. Now just make sure you do this in your nested scene, in the real scene. And I'm gonna adjust the saturation down a little bit so that I'm not looking so orange. I'm gonna adjust the brightness down a little bit as well. And this kind of almost adds a little bit of an effect on the edges, which I really do like. And we'll add a little bit of contrast. We'll kind of play around with it here, and I like that. That looks good. So what you're gonna do with your color correction is just kind of try to make it look like it should look. You want your colors to be right. And then we're gonna click the plus down in the bottom left again, and we're gonna go to color grading. And this is where we're gonna have a little bit of fun. We're gonna add some colors in here that might make it look different. And the first thing I'll do is scroll all the way down to the color correction, and I'll poke around with the saturation a little bit here and the lightness. But really that's not why we're in the color grading. We're in here because we wanna mess around and maybe add or remove some colors to make it look a little bit more like it's our own broadcast. Because you have shadow tints, mid-tone tints, and highlight tints, mid-tone tints. Try saying that 3 times real fast. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of settle on adjusting my green tints up a little bit. And I think the first one that I really like is this green highlight tint. You can see that the reflection of the lighting on my shoulder really does come alive. It makes it look like those lights I have in the background are more powerful than they are. And I kind of like that theory. So I'm still playing around with some of the blues and stuff, but I really do like that green tint coming off those lights. Even though it's phony, it's fun. And if I use a different color light, I can definitely adjust this for that. But I'm not going to go heavy-handed on this, and you really don't want to when you're doing color grading. The whole point of this is just to kind of add a little bit of your own personal style to it. And so I'm adding just a touch of the green here in the gain, which just bumps up the green a little bit. Now, obviously, I don't want my skin to be green or anything like that. We want to still look natural. But what this is doing is it's just adding a little bit of a tint to it. It makes it look, to me, like those lights have a little bit more power and energy than they really do. And I like that because that's a little piece of my creation. But the real point of this is just to make the image look the way that you want it, and to show you that you have the power to do all kinds of crazy things. And I'm gonna just turn the saturation down a little bit so the green is not too overpowering, but we do still get that reflective green off my shirt, which is something I really like. And that's the color correction and the color grading process. Cool stuff. This is another simple trick that is subtle, but really effective. This last one here requires a filter, so let me just show you how to install the filters on your system. Here we are on the web page, and I just click go to download. And next I'm going to go ahead and save the file. We hop on over into File Manager, and I just double click on the File Manager shader filter zip file, and I'm gonna open up that first folder, and I'm gonna copy out the data and OBS plugins folder. Now you're gonna copy this in your OBS directory. Most times it's gonna be in program files. Mine is actually located somewhere different. Right here, OBS-Studio. I'm gonna select that, right click and click paste. And since I have it already on here, I'm gonna go ahead and replace those files, and it's gonna stop me here because I'm actually running OBS. So I'll just skip that, but you shouldn't run into any of those problems. Shader filter is fully installed. All right, so now that we have our filter installed, the first thing we're gonna do is make sure that we're in our nested scene where we have our camera stuff created. Then we're gonna right click on our camera, and we're going to go to filters, and we're going to select user defined shader, and I'm gonna click OK. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select this load shader from file and browse. I'm gonna scroll all the way to the bottom, and I'm just gonna select this vignetting shader, and I'm gonna click open. And this puts that little border around the edge. Now you're gonna see that it makes it opaque, which means that the yellow is coming through. And that's kind of a cool look. I don't mind that, but it's really not what I'm going for. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click the plus and I'm gonna add another color source, and I'm just gonna call this one background. Click OK, and I'm gonna select the color. We're gonna make this color black and click OK. And now I'm gonna drag this above border but below the camera, and I'm just gonna resize this up. And I just want this to be behind my actual camera. That is the goal here. And I'm gonna have to just make it about the right size, and then I'll just hold the Alt key and drag this in, and there we go. I think we're pretty close there. We have a nice looking border. I mean, that's really what we're going for. And now it turns our vignetting dark, so it looks like we have a little bit of a portal thing going on, and it's just one more way to add an accent to your camera view. It's these simple little details that you can add. Now you can go in here and you can adjust these. You can use the sliders to adjust, but I find that if you use the slider, it really does adjust it super fast and it's difficult to use. So sometimes just the up and down keys or the arrows. You can play around with this and decide on what your vignetting is. If you go to 0, you get a vignette that's basically just a portal, and then you can kind of blur that out the more this number goes up. And I find that like 1, 2, or 3 seem to be about right. But you can play around with this vignette and find what works for you. Accent lights can add a lot of flair to your backdrop. For my accent lights in the background, I have a cheap strip of LEDs that you can change colors on, and these nifty little glass cups. Now your cups don't have to be this fancy. It doesn't really matter. You put your LEDs in there and they're gonna shine and they're gonna look really cool. You can get cheap ones pretty much anywhere, and you put your LEDs in there and voila, you have some really cool accent lights. Now for the bonus. It's really easy to create a more immersive live stream by changing your screen layouts every once in a while. Let me show you what I mean. Now this is where you're really going to see the power of those nested scenes, because all of the work that we did to get this camera looking the way we want it, well, we only have to do that one time. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna organize this. I'm gonna put my camera down here in the bottom right, and we have our backdrop here. Looks pretty good, and you know, most people would be perfectly fine with streaming just like this. It looks great, but we can take this a lot farther with very little work. So we're gonna just add another scene. I'm gonna click the plus, I'm gonna go into scene. We'll add our camera source, and you can see all the changes we made to that camera source, they're already there. We don't have to do anything. We just change that camera source and it will automatically have all the changes in all the scenes we're using it. And that's the beauty of nested scenes. Now I'm gonna click the plus under sources, and we're going to add the display capture. I'm going to add in another display capture right here. It's really the same one, and we're just going to size this up. We're going to move it down to the bottom, and we'll change the order so it's over top of the piece of my camera. And there we go. We'll move this up a little bit. We'll move this down a little bit. And what I'm going to do is click the plus, and I'm going to add another color source in here. And I'm just going to select color. We'll go with a blue. Click OK and OK, and I'm just gonna move this all the way to the bottom. So now we've got a little bit of color in our background. I'm gonna go to properties and adjust this color a little bit. I want it a little darker. You don't want it quite that bright. And there we go. So now we've got another scene with the same two elements, but a little bit of a cool background, and we can move these assets around. I want this a little bit off the edge there, and that looks pretty good. Let's add another scene. We'll call this one scene 3, and I'm gonna add basically the same elements. We're gonna add our scene and go and add our nested camera, and there we go. Just resize this real quick, maybe right there. Then I'm gonna click the plus, and I'm gonna add our display capture again. We're gonna use the same one, and we'll move the order here so our camera is in the back. And I'm just gonna kind of adjust the size a little bit on this. There we go. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click the plus, and I'm gonna go to media source and click OK, and I'm gonna browse. I'm just gonna add a little bit of a video background here to give it a little more visual interest. I'm gonna select one and click open. It's a short clip, so I'm gonna click loop and OK, and then I'm gonna move it all the way to the bottom. So now this one has a little bit of an animated background, and it looks pretty good. So now when we switch scenes, you can see they're all the same, but they all have a dynamically different look. So you can switch between these scenes while you're live streaming, and we can take this a step further by using the move transition here on the right. Just gonna drop this down, select the move transition, and then I'm gonna select contains the other names. And that's all we need to do. Click OK, and now when we switch scenes, our assets are just gonna slide to their new locations. And it's that simple. So now we have 3 different scenes that show a tutorial, and it makes it much more dynamic. It adds visual interest for your audience, so they're not always looking at the exact same thing. And this really does take it up a notch. And it's so simple. If you want to learn more about creating dynamic camera frames easy, check this video out. And if you're always looking for tools, tips, and tricks that can help make you a better YouTuber, subscribe to the channel. It's totally free. My name is Michael Fire Jr. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.